Now, one of the grassroots organizations in the United States long advocating for equal justice for Palestinians is the Rachael Corrie Foundation for Peace and Justice. In 2003, Rachael Corrie, a 23-year-old American university student, was crushed to death by an Israeli army bulldozer in Gaza. She was participating in non-violent direct action to stop the demolition of a Palestinian family's home. Since her death, her parents have taken up her cause to foster global peace and human rights. Rachael Corrie's parents, Craig and Cindy Corrie, join me now from Olympia, Washington State. Cindy and Craig Corrie, thank you both so much for being with me. The extraordinary courage, the unflinching commitment to justice for Palestinians that your daughter Rachael showed in her journal, in her letters, her emails and writings from Palestine almost 20 years ago are not the words Americans are used to hearing about this conflict. In fact, here's some of what she wrote in February 2003, just a few weeks before she was killed by an Israeli bulldozer. She wrote this: "Just want to write to my mom and tell her that I'm witnessing this chronic, insidious genocide, and I'm really scared and questioning my fundamental belief in the goodness of human nature. This has to stop. I think it is a good idea for us all to drop everything and devote our lives to making this stop." Do you believe the White House will eventually understand and heed Rachael's call? What will it take?
I think that it's beginning to happen. There has been a tremendous change, growing awareness in the country about what's happening to the Palestinians, not just in moments like we're experiencing now, but really every day. And the humiliation that they live with, the taking of their land, the threat to them in so many ways. And so I think it's beginning to happen. And we've had experience with some who are in high levels of government right now. And we know that they understand this situation. So we're just waiting to hear them speak and act more clearly and dramatically about what the U.S. should do.
But the narrative here in the U.S. is still about both sides, meaning Israel versus Hamas and its rockets. It conveniently forgets the occupation, the subjugation of the Palestinian people for decades now. No mention of the Israeli strikes, the evictions from their homes, the eviction of Palestinians from their homes, the destruction of olive trees, the cutting off of water, of electricity at will. The way the conflict is presented in the US shows Palestinians as the violent aggressors.
I'm 74 years old. This has been going on actually longer than my lifetime. As the state of Israel, it's almost exactly my lifetime. And I think that in the United States, we tend to pay attention when the violence gets obvious, when the bombing that Israel does on Palestinians happens, but we need to be paying attention all of the time. The occupation is incredibly violent. If you're there, as we have been in Sheikh Jarrah, and trying to have tea with a very lovely family, and this is over 10 years ago, and the front half of their house is already occupied by a settler. And listening to him, I think he was from Brooklyn. You know, you recognize the English accent. That's not an eviction. We're talking about ethnic cleansing, and it's been going on my entire lifetime. And as Rachael said, it needs to stop. The White House has been aware since Rachael's killing. We've been in contact with people, and in 2010. For instance, we were talking to Tony Blinken, now the Secretary of State, but then he was an advisor to Vice President Biden. And he told us, as he walked into the room, he said, "We can agree on one thing, that the policy in Gaza is a failed policy. And by that, I don't mean that they should have more food. I mean that they should be able to export as well as import. Their students should be able to go abroad to school. Business people should be able to come into the area. They should be having continuous electricity." And he went on to say that list. Cindy looked at him when he was done and said, "That's our list. That's why we came here." So when you say, do they know? They absolutely know, and they have known for a long time. When you say, are they going to act? That's a different question.
Cindy, but what will it take to change public opinion to such an extent that it might put pressure on the US administration to have a different approach to this conflict, a less one-sided approach? Because many years ago, Rachel wrote this to you. She said, I thought a lot about what you said on the phone about Palestinian violence not helping the situation. If any of us had our lives and welfare completely strangled, lived with children in a shrinking place where we knew that soldiers and tanks and bulldozers could come for us at any moment, do you think we might try to use somewhat violent means to protect whatever fragments remained? I really think in a similar situation, most people would defend themselves as best they could. I think I would. How did Rachel make you think differently about this conflict? And are more people in the US becoming more sensitized to the plight of Palestinians?
Rachel absolutely brought us to the conflict. When she went there, we started to learn, and she was our mentor. We knew how very much her words mattered to her. She was precise, she was careful. And she started to educate not just her parents and her siblings, but her entire extended family and friends. And I think that her work, but the work of so many others, has continued. And we have changed the discourse here in the United States among the American public. And we've had organizations arise and become much stronger. Jewish Voice for Peace and American Muslims for Palestine, many organizations that are working on this. I think it's powerful these days to see young Palestinians here in the United States speaking out, and now providing some of the most effective voices, I think, in sharing their own stories and their family stories. We have to keep doing the work. We have to be persistent, and we have to work on our representatives in government. And I'm so delighted really this week to see that people like Bernie Sanders are speaking out. But even those that have been strong Israeli supporters, Robert Menendez and others, are really challenging what's happening on the ground in Gaza right now. That's important. But what's even maybe more important is that we don't stop. Once this ends, we know at some point, I don't know how many losses there will be, far too many. But at some point, this will stop, and then our job is to keep the discourse going and to make substantive change and to make sure that the language of human rights that the Biden administration has been sharing, that applies to what Israel does, as well as to other countries.
But how do you affect policy change, Craig, beyond these promising and encouraging statements of support that a lot of members of Congress and others have been showing Palestinians and those fighting for justice? How do you confront Israel's impunity? You both filed a lawsuit against the Israeli army for the killing of Rachel. You asked for a symbolic $1 in damages. Yet an Israeli judge dismissed the case, saying it was a regrettable accident. How do you fight and win against Israeli impunity?
I think you just have to keep trying. I think our lawsuit was one avenue, and of course the lawsuit went on actually for years. We were in court, and now it's been so long that I'd forgotten, but over and over again. And there was somebody from the U.S. Embassy every day that we were in court listening to that. But we have to put pressure on our Congress and on the White House to look at this, and it is changing. I think political pressure has always been seen as coming from the Israeli side, but that's changing in the United States. Our friends with Jewish Voice for Peace are responsible for some of that. The young people here are seeing this from both sides. It will take a long time. I think the other thing is that we have to congratulate small steps, as Cindy just did. We also have to keep working on this. So BDS, boycott, divestment, and sanctions. We have to be working on that. We have to make sure that nobody criminalizes what, of course, this country started with BDS, with a Tea Party in Boston. It's a great tradition in here, and I think as we look at it, this is a strategy that started or was used with South Africa, and it did not destroy South Africa. In my opinion, it saved South Africa. So we need to keep working on this and working with all of our friends in the United States and our friends in Palestine and actually inside Israel.
The work continues, as you say. There certainly has been some palpable change, the first steps perhaps on the road to real change. Craig and Cindy Corrie, thank you so much for speaking with me. I know how difficult it is to relive the tragic loss of your daughter, Rachael, but also how important it is to make sure that her legacy lives on and to continue the work that she and so many others have started. Thank you both so much.
Thank you for
very
having
much.
us.